both Obama and Romney have been going toward big donors, whether it's out in the Hamptons or Aspen or wherever they have to go to get the money. So the question becomes, what will the actual influence of money be? And is it going to be more than just a talking point or sort of an optical influence on the campaign? It's not moving the polls yet. That might come later, especially as we get closer to the campaign, to the election. But the way I'd like to set this up, if you would all oblige me, is I've taken a couple of recent articles about the influence of money, and I've pulled 4 quotes that I think are used as sort of a premise to suggest something nefarious about money, or to use money to set up their guy as somehow benefiting from this wave of pro-candidate voter sentiment. And then I want to pick each one of them apart. So I'm going to start with the first one, said by my buddy Reince Priebus, who I love, but I actually am going to take some issue with this quote. He said, "Our June fundraising is a sign that voters are fed up with President Obama's failure to fix our economy, and they want a change of direction. President Obama is clearly in over his head, and Americans deserve better." Well, I take the last part to be true. But is this a fair premise to suggest that fundraising ability is somehow linked to voter sentiment? Because you could easily pick that apart and suggest that, well, maybe this is a couple big donors, whereas the other guy has thousands of donors making smaller contributions, and that might be more indicative of voter sentiment. Vote counts once. These money donations don't. What do you think?
I buy your last premise. I think there's no connection between fundraising ability and the current pulse of the American public.
So then why do both candidates continually go out and say, look how much money we've raised as a point of pride?
It fosters that perception over a limited period of time. They're willing to try to get that bump, which is that I have the momentum. I'm doing well. Look at me. I raised all this money. And not dealing with the reality, which is, well, in a week, the other guy's going to have more money.
And so when
it's like
the other
weather,
guy,
this is going to change all the time.
Creating a scoreboard where none is
exactly, and people latch onto this because it's a way of measuring the candidates quantifiably head to head.
But so are voters, do you think, going to hold anyone responsible for one day going out and saying, look how much money I raised, people really like me, and then the next week saying, look how much money he raised, this is nefarious?
Wasn't Barack Obama for public financing of his campaign before he was against it? Before he realized he could raise so much money, I think.
Before he realized it was going to really hurt his campaign.
But I think it is important, too, as you say, to look at the source of that money. And so, for example, there are reports that Wall Street might not be quite so hospitable to the Obama campaign. And that, at least, I think, is a reflection of policy.
No, opportunism. It's opportunism.
I think that's
attitude toward
real
policy.
Right. And the effects of that might be real in a way that the effects of this individual donor or large donor effects might not be.
Correct. But, I would suggest, too,
when you're looking at an entire sector.
Sure. In the media, when the left says, oh, money is such a corrupting influence in politics and campaigns, and it takes away the voice of the little people. Just this weekend, I was actually in Los Angeles and happened to be with some folks who worked on the ill-fated Michael Huffington campaign back in 1994 when he broke all records in spending on his campaign, $20 million to try to get to the United States Senate, and he lost. In a year that was a Republican landslide.
Money can't buy you love.
No, it can't buy you love, and it can't buy you a seat. And I think we overestimate it.
Stop people from talking about money. So the next quote I'm going to give you guys is from an RNC official who said, the RNC officials say 94% of the contributions they received last month were for $250 or less, an indication that Romney is attracting not just the big donors that Democrats like to hammer about, but the smaller grassroots support that helped fuel Obama's path to victory in 2008. So is this true, that smaller donations are a sign that the candidate is reaching real America as opposed to elite America, and that is going to somehow turn out in the polls?
Over the course of the whole, if you're looking at as your sample, the course of the whole election cycle, I think that maybe you could make that argument, but you certainly couldn't make it based on a month. Again, we're looking at sort of snapshots in time here. And when you're looking at grassroots fundraising, there's going to be, as we know, issues will come up. Issues will, in fact, be manufactured by these campaigns at given times in order to
You mean like the war on women?
Like the war on women, like the immigration issue we've recently dealt with. And we've dealt with them each here on the show. So, yeah, I think it's an issue about the timing of it.